Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Let's give 2 minutes for people to enter, and then we get started. So while you are entering, you can locate the Q&A section at the bottom of your screens, which you can use throughout the webinar and send questions to us. All right, maybe 1 more minute. Very nice crowd we have today. Happy to see so many people interested in biochar, and that shows that biochar has become well known and relevant in the carbon markets. Just checking that you are hearing us well. No technical problems in seeing the slide or hearing.
And on my side as well, I hope my microphone is well set for all of you to hear me.
Yeah, thank you, Elias. I can hear you, and I see that people have commented that they are hearing us well. And also Q&A works. Thank you. Now I think we have tested the technicalities and we can get started. Warm welcome to everybody from Helsinki, Finland. My name is Marianne Tikkanen. I will be your host today, together with Dr. Elias Assi, who will take you through the changes in the Puro Biochar Methodology. And remember that this is a draft that is open for public consultation, so we are very much looking forward to your comments and feedback on everything that has been proposed so far. But shall we then get started? So the house rules are that use the Q&A, and then we will go through the main changes here. Over to you, Elias.
Thanks, Marianne. So for this introduction to our updated methodology, we will take about 45 minutes and go over the main changes. But before we go into the technicalities, the agenda for today is that we'll also start first with a brief overview of biochar as a carbon removal method for those who are not familiar with biochar. We'll say a couple of words on the update process that we are following and the scope of the consultation. And then we'll have also a couple of words and slides on the other consultation documents, because this consultation is not only the biochar methodology, but also side documents that come with it. And then most of the time will be focused on the methodology draft, its outline, and key changes by sections. We'll also have then an overall summary, of course, of everything that has been said. So the biochar here at Puro Earth is certified for its carbon removal benefits, but it's worth understanding and reminding that biochar is not only about carbon removal. It has also very valuable effects for climate change mitigation and has a role to play in sustainability transition as a whole. This flowchart here on this slide describes a biochar system as a whole from biomass production. So biochar can be produced from different types of biomass and that have to be produced and sourced. During the carbonization process of biomass, that's when biochar is produced alongside other materials, namely pyrolysis gases and tars, which can be used. And so these are commonly used for energy production or also for the production of certain biomaterials. And they are a side product or a co-product to biochar. But then the main product, biochar, can be used in various applications combined with other materials to make various kind of products which have a use, a benefits during the use phase, and then an end of life. So biochar can be used, for instance, in the agricultural sector, in animal husbandry, but also in construction materials, certain type of filters, and the list goes on. And the key thing when we look at this flowchart to understand that biochar is not just carbon removal is that a biochar system delivers several functions. In certain cases, the biomass feedstock that is used for production can be a problematic feedstock that is currently badly managed, and making biochar out of it can be seen as an improved management practice for biomass residues. The co-products have energy applications or biomaterial applications that can replace fossil alternatives, for instance, and have further climate change mitigation benefits. And also the biochar product itself, when a biochar product is used, it can replace alternative products. For instance, in the case of horticulture, biochar can be used as a replacement for peat, which has a high environmental footprint. And so that's why we say that biochar systems are not only carbon removal, but also beneficial for other aspects of sustainability transitions. This brief introduction on biochar system being done, I want to move now to the reasons why we have been updating our biochar methodology and remind also on the scope of that consultation. So the primary reasons and objectives for updating the biochar methodology this year is the alignment with our latest version of the general rules, but also alignment with voluntary standards for the integrity of carbon removal credits, such as the ICVCM and CORSIA. But also in addition of these two aspects that are more regulatory ones, we wanted to take the opportunity of that update to incorporate all the feedback we have received from suppliers and buyers alike, and the experience we have gained from operating certification of biochar since 2019. Another important aspect of an update, and all the updates we do at Puro, is to incorporate and align with the new science that has been published since our last major updates. And conceptually, I also want to highlight that this update is also a shift in Puro's practice for how we write methodologies. And you will probably notice that this document is much longer than our previous biochar methodology. And the reason behind that is that back in 2019, we had very concise, high-level principles setting the basis for CDR. And today, the way we write the methodology is much more practical and looks like an applied handbook on how to do biochar carbon removal. And that's why we also believe that this document is improving the clarity around the rules and is going to be very useful for operations and for all the entities that have to work with this document. The update process started a year ago, approximately. We started that in 2024. We have gathered a working group of more than 40 organizations representing producers of biochar, buyers of biochar credits, but also LCA consultancies, project developers, insurance companies of various kinds that contributed to the update. We've held with this working groups a series of workshops on different topics. And after the workshops were conducted and we've collected various inputs and feedback, we've also had follow-up meetings with series of experts, academics and industry experts alike. And because many things are happening in the biochar sphere, we've been also following the progress of other initiatives such as the European Union's methodology development work and the ICVCM assessments that have been ongoing in parallel. And all of that has informed our work in the past year. And thereby, I also want to take the opportunity to thank all the contributors to this workshop, the working groups in particular, but also all the individual experts that we have been lucky to talk to make this update. I want also to remind here the dates for the consultation. We are roughly midway, and you have all until April 24th to submit your feedback using the form we have provided via the email address that is shown on this slide. And as I've said earlier, this consultation is not about the biochar methodology alone. That's one of the 3 documents that we have for consultation here. And the 2 other ones are the biomass sourcing criteria that apply to the biochar methodology, and also what we call here a transition plan that explains how we will be managing the transition from the current edition of the methodology to the new one. And now I would like to spend a couple of minutes.
Can I pause you there, Elias, and answer a couple of practical questions that have come to us? The recording will be shared, so this recording will be available to you and others through Puro website. And then there was a question about the deadline, April 24th, if that can be extended. That is a Thursday, so I can promise that if you have your feedback to us by the following Monday, we will consider it definitely. But extending it by a lot will then delay the following steps, which this still needs to go through the advisory board final approval, and of course all the comments have to be addressed and edited where needed. So, but a couple of days extension is surely possible. Yes. Thank you, and then we can move on.
Okay, so regarding our transition plan, I want to mention that this is a suggested transition plan, and you have the opportunity to give feedback on this plan. The main elements of the transition plan are as follows. First, for certified facilities who are already issuing corks, it will be possible to continue using the edition 2022 until the end of the crediting periods. And that is so for regular output audits, assuming that no major changes take place at the facility. This being said, certified facilities have the possibility and are actually encouraged to transition earlier to edition 2025. And on the other hand, for facilities that are not yet certified but have been registered already, there is a last date until which it will be possible to get a facility audit against the previous edition, edition 2022, and that date is set for now to the 1st of December 2025. Onwards, if a facility was registered but has not yet completed a facility audit, or has not been sent to audit more precisely, beyond 1st of December 2025, it will be required to transition to preparing its audit for the new edition. And for facilities that are registered after the date of launch, which is here set to August the 1st, it will automatically go to the new edition. And that's the plan we are proposing, and there are more details on the exact dates and the moments in the certification process that trigger certain transitions here. So please have a look at the detailed document. It's I think 2 or 3 page long document with clear rules on how things will apply to different entities or different situations.
And Elias, there are questions related to this timing of the transition. How long can I continue using the current methodology?
So, well, as I've said, for certified facilities, until the end of the crediting period. So if you have 2 years left of your crediting period, you can keep using it for 2 years. If you had 3 or 4 years left, then the same applies.
Thank you. And if you wonder what your crediting period is, the public Puro registry holds that information. So registry.puro.earth. Then a question of why should my project transition earlier to edition 25?
Well, there are various reasons and incentives to transition earlier to the new methodology. One of them, as we will see it later in the presentation, is that the new methodology comes with an increased durability claim for the biochar corks, increased to several centuries. But there may also be other incentives, such as buyers or offtake agreements that will require you to use the updated version due to its higher integrity and higher durability claim associated with it.
Okay. And then there is somebody who is just submitting their documents. So they ask if we have just submitted our documents for audit, what should we do?
If you have just submitted documents for your facility audit, so your entire audit package, we will keep reviewing those audit packages as normal and send them to audit if they are complete and ready until the date of termination that is shown here on the slide. But if everything goes well and you're ready before date of termination, nothing to worry about. You can go as planned to the audit with edition 2022. However, if during the review that Puro does of your audit documents, we identify that there are issues and non-compliance with the current rules, we will ask for revisions. But if those revisions are major and make that you cannot meet the deadline of 1st of December, then you will be asked to transition to the new audit document templates and reporting requirements and new equations for persistence, as we will also see later in this presentation.
Okay.
I think I answered the question.
Yeah. I think it was clear. Final question on this slide, and then we move on. Is there extra cost related to the early transition to the new methodology version?
Well, I should say that from the Puro side, there will not be any additional auditing costs or any additional service fee for transitioning earlier to the methodology. But there might be costs related to your operations if you have to increase testing frequency, or if you have to make any changes to the facility designs or adding new sensors, for instance. Then there might be costs on that end, but they are not pure fees or pure certification costs per se.
Okay. So let's move on.
Yes. So the second document we have for consultation is what we call the biomass sourcing criteria. And this document is basically a set of rules that apply on how to source biomass adequately. These criteria were introduced with our other methodology called geological storage of carbon. And it now applies to several methodologies that rely on biomass for the removal. Now, the change we are making here from version 1 to 1.1 are actually relatively minor. We are adding some clarification on the text and the naming of certain categories that we had in that list. And for instance, for forest biomass, we here want to highlight in its name that it's forest biomass managed in a way that preserves long-term carbon stocks. And also we highlight better that the sustainability criteria we have in that category prevent the use or forbid the use of biomass that is of a certain quality that can be used for long-lived construction material. And that has been highlighted and made clearer because we have received feedback on that aspect earlier. But the second change we're doing here with this biomass sourcing criteria is that we're also adding one new category of biomass that has been discussed and requested on various aspects for biochar, but also for bio-CCS. And that category is the one that refers to biomass sourced from land clearing under very specific conditions, namely biomass that is cleared in the context of state-authorized activities in relation to, for instance, urban expansion, construction of pipelines, or power line construction. For this type of biomass, there is a land use change happening, and technically the biomass is considered non-renewable. However, the land use change emissions are actually attributed to another activity, namely construction of a new building, construction of a pipeline or a power line. And this is commonly a feedstock that is available for biochar production, but also for BECCS projects and used. And so we added that category to make it explicit that specific rules will apply to that feedstock. For instance, the fact that this cannot be any type of land clearing, but restricted to non-protected areas, non-high value ecosystems. So really city-urban expansion, that is a fairly normal practice. Yes.
Thank you, Elias. A couple of biomass-related questions, if we can cover them here. There is a project saying that we are planning to use corn stover to make biochar. Is it allowed?
So corn stover, if I understand correctly, is an in-field agricultural residue, so something produced alongside corn production. And yes, stover is an allowed feedstock to produce biochar. But we'll come back to biomass rules a bit later in the presentation.
Okay, thank you. And another question, what categories are not allowed for biochar production?
Okay, again, we'll see that in the next section in more detail, but I can answer briefly here that technically for producing good quality biochar, any feedstock is acceptable to one exception, and that is mixed municipal solid waste. For various reasons, we have decided not to allow biochar production from mixed municipal solid waste.
Okay. Thank you. And then we can move on.
Okay. So now I'm leaving these other documents from the consultation on the side, and we are diving into the biochar methodology itself. So overall, the changes we are introducing are gradual changes, including all the learnings from that we have made since 2019, and it's moving towards strengthen integrity for biochar-based corks and removals. This slide is a summary of the changes in 10 bullet points, and they go from changes in persistence, equations and durability claims. It covers, we have also done changes in the frequencies of biochar characterization for its persistence properties, but also environmental properties. We've added a lot of clarifications and explanations when it comes to, for instance, definitions of types of production facilities, whether they're mobile or stationary, and also explicit procedures for increased audit capacity expansion audits, for instance. And then the list goes on here with more eligibility criteria regarding the biomass, the production of the biochar, and the rules regarding the use of biochar, as well as other rules regarding monitoring and quantification in general. We'll go into the details here for these bullet points, but this is kind of a summary slide you can take with you. So the methodology outline to start with. On the side, you have here the previous outline, what we had before, and the methodology was about 15 pages long. Now we have a revised outline covering the similar topics, but in a different manner. And now the total methodology and the rules cover is approximately 129 pages of text and examples and motivations. So the introduction gives a brief overview of biochar as a CDR and reminds the scope of the methodology. The point of creation is the chapter that specifies the notion of CO2 removal supplier, the definition of a production facility, the length of the crediting period, as well as the point of creation of corks, which is the earliest moment in the supply chain when you can report and get a cork when you've done the biochar production and use. Section 3 is the section that defines what is an eligible biochar activity and all the rules that come with it. And we'll dig into that chapter more in detail after. Chapter 4 is the one that provides an overview of the reversal, environmental and social risk associated with biochar activities, also specifying how the methodology is tackling those risks and addressing them, and also what is left for the supplier to do and demonstrate during the certification process. Then section 5, 6, 7, and 8 relate to the quantification. So in section 5, we present the overall cork equation, while then in chapter 6, 7, and 8, we explain how to calculate different terms of that overall equation. And the last 3 chapters, 9, 10, and 11, they relate to monitoring, measuring, and reporting, and basically explain how suppliers shall plan and document their operation so that the performance of the carbon removal activity can be verified efficiently. And that includes different dimensions of monitoring, measurement, but also quantifying of uncertainty. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Yes, so that's an overview of the methodology outline. And if we go now into more practical details, I want to mention that the scope of the methodology remains rather unchanged. Any biomass that is demonstrated to be sourced sustainably can be used for biochar production, to the exception of mixed municipal solid waste. And that is unchanged to current practice. Likewise, unchanged is that we allow for multiple carbonization technologies, provided that they meet the eligibility rules that are defined. And so we can have anything from slow pyrolysis to gasification technologies, as well as retrofitted combustion systems that are eligible. We also have a range of technologies that can be mobile or stationary reactors. And those exist in continuous, batch, or semi-continuous operation mode. And all of that is potentially eligible. Then we also have multiple biochar applications that are eligible for corks. And that is as long as the uses or applications are safe, environmentally safe, and demonstrated to be with low reversal risks. And also, we allow for different types of biochar projects with clarified eligibility rules here. So we can have new built biochar projects, as well as retrofits of existing assets and charcoal repurposing facilities. Yes, and I think that the notions that I've introduced before regarding the CO2 removal supplier, the production facility, the crediting period, and the point of creation also remain largely unchanged, but with clarified definitions and rules in chapter 2. Continuing here with section 3, that is the outline of section 3 with 8 subchapters going from general aspects to the actual biochar supply chain, additionality rules, and baseline rules. What is worth mentioning here is that in the first subsection, we have clarified rules on the audit procedures, the facility audit and the output audit, but also added explicitly how to handle situations where a project would be increasing its production capacity by adding new reactors to an existing facility. And that's what we here call a capacity expansion audit. Then we have in the next section clarified different types of baseline situations that exist, or baseline scenarios. And that's, again, we distinguish between new build facilities, retrofit facilities, and charcoal repurpose facilities. And we also have a couple of rules on to handle special cases, such as the case of transfers of ownership from a facility from one entity to another, and also exception mechanisms to handle unforeseen situations there. When it comes to the additionality demonstration, it remains largely unchanged. Additionality is still made of a three component: carbon baseline additionality, regulatory additionality, and financial aspects. But we've also clarified here in the text what financial aspect must be covered, how they shall be covered. And in special situations, such as the case of treatment of waste biomass like sewage sludge, we've clarified how to handle it from an additionality perspective. Likewise, for the retrofit and charcoal repurpose baseline scenarios, we have also clarified what is important to tackle from a financial perspective relative to the baseline here. And if we continue here, I'm skipping the sections 4 to 6 here, because I'm going to dig deeper into them later. But if I want to tackle the two last ones briefly. When it comes to positive impacts on the SDGs, we are aligning here with our last version of the general rules. And basically, we are encouraging suppliers to apply for certification of co-benefits via the Puro SDG attribute system. We're encouraged, but it remains an optional certification scheme here. And at minima, what is required here is that in all project description, there is a project-specific analysis of the co-benefits that is made, and that is subject to verification, but is not as detailed as certifying here co-benefits in the form of attributes or labels. And when it comes to 3.8, the prevention of double counting, the principles here are largely unchanged again, but we've clarified the aspects of product labeling and product transaction documentation. Similar to how we operate as of today in our audit documents requirements, but then this is now clarified in the rules. And likewise, we also have added a couple of paragraphs here on the alignment of the carbon removal activity with host country commitment plans. And that's in alignment with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, but also other mechanisms that require those aspects to be covered. And now it's time to dig.
Thank you, Elias. And just note that we may have to speed up. We have roughly 15 minutes time left, and we need to come to the quantification and permanence issues as well. Let me ask two questions still here from the audience. How much work is it for a certified biochar project to update to the methodology?
For a certified facility, well, it's largely dependent on the case, I would say, and the effort has primarily to be done on documentation of the activity, and it's a lot more details on the reporting that will be required, I would say, and as well changing of testing procedures to some extent and so on.
Okay. And another question, will I lose the certification if I cannot meet the new requirements?
So in the normal case, no. Until the end of the crediting period, you can keep using the same edition. So you will not lose your certification. But when the crediting period ends and you're required to update to the latest version of the methodology, if for some reason you're not able to meet the compliance with the new rules, yes, then you will lose certification. But that is only at the end of your crediting period.
Okay, thank you. And then let's try to cover the the rest in the remaining time.
Yes, I'll try to adjust the speed here to reflect the time limit we have. So in the biomass, let's do like this. So in the biomass section, you will see that we now refer to the biomass sourcing criteria. And the principle here is that the biomass sourcing criteria are designed in a way that any biomass that exists on Earth can be classified into one of the categories that are reported there. And once you identify what category applies to your biomass source, you basically know what traceability and sustainability criteria are applicable and must be demonstrated. But these criteria, or let's say general and applicable to all removal pathways that Puro is certifying. But they're not specific to biochar. And that's why in the methodology itself, you have additional rules that are there to make sure that the biomass is suited for biochar and managed properly for biochar production purposes. And the couple of topics we tackle in the methodology refer here to stockpiling and biomass decay on site, mixing of biomass and the effect it may have on the biochar properties, the management of impurities such as glass, metal, and plastic, also the management of micropollutants such as heavy metals or other biological hazards that can be present in, for instance, manure, and then also the management of fossil-derived carbon that can be present in certain biomass feedstocks. When it comes to the production of biochar, again, type of reactors remains unchanged, but classification is now more explicit. When it comes to emissions of air pollutants, it's also unchanged. We are aligning with local regulation requirements. When it comes to solid liquid waste and co-products generated by the biochar activity, we have now an explicit reporting requirement on the fate of those materials, and clarify that the rules how different types of products have to be managed to ensure safe disposal or use. When in many cases, of course, co-products will be combusted on site for either flaring purposes or for energy production. And here we've added a lot of clarifications and explanations on how to do that properly, going from design measures of complete combustions, but also management of flame out events, monitoring of the operating time of combustion systems, as well as the flame quality. When it comes to greenhouse gases, they were already included in the previous editions, but here we're making it clarified how to include them, how to do measurements, and we're also suggesting a limit value for CH4 emissions that is a bit stricter than what we had before, but not deemed to affect projects certified. And we also have a default value proposed for N2O emissions in the absence of measurements. And an important aspect where we still look for feedback is on the industry best practice for conducting greenhouse gas measurements. We are making a suggestion here in the methodology to uniformize across practices that we have observed in different world regions. And then there are other aspects that were covered before that remains unchanged. I don't spend too much time here. When it comes to biochar characterization, so the analysis of the biochar properties, we still have a limit at the HC ratio of 0.7. We are still requiring analysis of the biochar properties per biochar type, but we also now require separate monitoring of different reactors and different streams of biochar in special cases where you have a machine that produces multiple streams of biochar. When it comes to the sampling and the analysis, we are putting forward one approach for sampling methods and also introduce the fact that suppliers are required to retain samples for the auditing purposes if need be. And also we clarify when sampling needs to happen in the event that the biochar after production is then further processed, and that processing may affect the sampling strategy. But last but not least, we also now have set a minimum on the analysis frequency in the laboratory that reads as follow, where we have we require at least one analysis per 1,000 dry metric ton of biochar, or at least once per quarter, whichever occurs first. And also we tied this minimum frequency of analysis to the availability of monitoring of the production conditions and facilities that can demonstrate stable pyrolysis temperature and residence time, or eligible to having a lower frequency of analysis, so less testing sent to laboratory. But again, here feedback is welcome on the threshold we are defining and the applicability of these rules to different suppliers. When it comes to the biochar use, we are building up on the same principles as we had before, the proof of end use, but increasing the reporting and the granularity of that reporting. Two main aspects for biochar use. One is that biochar must be safe for use, and that is remaining unchanged as before in terms of the threshold values, but again, frequency of analysis is increased in the same way as for carbon and persistence properties. And the second aspect is here the proof of end use. We need to demonstrate that biochar use has taken place. And now the methodology is detailing 28 categories of applications for biochar. 20 of them are eligible for corks. 6 are allowed, but not eligible for corks. And there are also 2 categories of use that are explicitly marked as not allowed. And suppliers who want to be certified with us are not allowed to use any of their biochar produced in those 2 applications, which are environmentally dangerous applications that we've identified and we want to say no to. But then when it comes to demonstrating that biochar use has taken place for any of these eligible categories, we are redesigning a bit the systems we have in place here, and highlight that basically the level of evidence needed depends on 3 factors. The first factor is whether biochar has been used pure or mixed into a product. And whenever biochar is mixed into a product, the risks associated, the diversion risks in particular, are usually lower, and that can allow us to lower the level of evidence required. The second dimension and factor to consider is whether the application is a final application, like applied to soil, or if it's a cascading application. And if it's cascading, then there are application-specific risks that must be considered and addressed. And last, the third dimension is relating to intermediaries, whether they are in the distribution chain of biochar any intermediaries. If they are, an extended monitoring throughout the distribution chain is required. A lot of details are in the methodology, and I invite you to look at section 3.6 in detail to understand how these 3 concepts are then applied and have effect on the monitoring procedures that are required from the suppliers.
Okay, Elias, we are actually almost on time here, and sorry for those who do have to leave, but there is the recording that you will have. I propose we continue so that we can cover the rest of the topics, and then the recording will also be available.
Yes. Okay, then we continue here with the quantification, and that's my last section, quantification and monitoring. So the general equation is presented in section 5. It has these different components covering the amount of carbon stored, any carbon that would have been stored already in the baseline, carbon losses due to the persistence of biochar, and then project emissions and indirect emissions. I want to highlight that there are subsections and other chapters that define how to calculate every term here, but also highlight that this equation is presented here at a generic level, at a high level, but in practice, a lot of the calculations are done at a more detailed level. For instance, carbon stored calculation are performed at the biochar batch level, while, for instance, the amortization of capital emissions is something done at the facility and reporting period level. And that complexity exists in actual operations. We know how to handle that complexity in our templates and reporting procedures, but it's not directly visible in the equation here. It would be too complex to visualize. And now I will take kind of the terms in reverse order from indirect emissions up to carbon stored. And for indirect emissions, we've now added those explicit requirements in Chapter 8. They are pretty much aligned with the concepts and approaches of the CDM, so the Clean Development Mechanism of the United Nations. And that is also expected to align with the ICVCM, where we distinguish different types of indirect effects, also certain effects regarding to biomass diversion. And we really would like to have additional feedback here in the consultation on whether these rules are implementable, if there is data available and evidence available for that. When it comes to the project emissions, so what we usually call talk about the life cycle assessment of the biochar supply chain, here the scope of the inventory remains largely unchanged. But various clarifications have been made on what to include in, for instance, on biomass supply chain emissions. If it was not already clear from the previous one, we've added more clarity there. Where the changes start to come in is here for the LCA report. Before we were requiring a complete LCA report that was very extensive as a PDF. While here now we are moving to a more compact LCA model descriptions that focuses on how the LCA equations have been built and how they are, what assumptions and choices have been made there. And we think that this shift is more pragmatic and efficient and will be more useful for verification purposes. What remains unchanged, however, is that the calculations must be still updated for each reporting instance. So for each output audit, LCA numbers need to be updated. But the structure of those calculations will change a little bit. And the main thing we are introducing here is a separation between operational emissions and capital or so-called foreground embodied emissions. So operational emissions will be quantified on an ongoing basis, while foreground embodied emissions, so basically the capital emission associated with building the biochar factory, will be reported separately because they are subject to a different amortization scheme, basically over the first crediting period, so a 5-year amortization for the capital emissions. And last, here for project emissions, we are increasing a little bit the level of transparency and reporting of those emissions. We have the same categorization of emissions through biomass, sourcing, production, and use. But now we're adding that the amortization of embodied emissions and any land use change related to that will also be reported separately, an additional term there. And now I come to the persistence of biochars and the quantification of carbon stored and carbon losses. Briefly, as a summary of the biochar persistence science is that the long-term persistence of biochar is primarily related to its aromatic carbon structures, but also certain environmental factors as secondary elements here. The main changes for that methodology will be that we are increasing the durability claim associated with biochar corks from 100 years to several centuries, which we will label as Cork 200 plus. And in relation with that, we are also changing the persistence calculation. And Puro is here proposing a revised decay-based set of equation based on the latest research that was published in the last couple of years. And in short, you have the equations visible. The outcome of the equation is here visible on the slide. That's the range of persistence that we can calculate with that model or decay-based model. And the key parameters that still need to be measured and monitored from suppliers or the hydrogen to carbon ratio of the sample and also the average soil temperature in the area of use, that remaining unchanged to current practice. But we also now have added an optional reporting of random reflectance measurement. And I want to stress that this random reflectance measurement needs to follow the procedures and guidelines we have described in the methodology. And Puro's objective here is to support continued development of random reflectance measurements and their understanding of its persistence interpretation, as well as support its deployment and the commercial availability of that method. For more details on our approaches, reasoning, modeling details, I want to refer to section 6.2 of the methodology there. And second last slide here is regarding the last 3 chapters on the monitoring, measurement, and reporting. In very short, these sections are introducing an alignment with our latest general rules, stating that all projects must have a comprehensive monitoring plan covering not only the quantification of the removal aspect, but also monitoring of other eligibility rules, and environmental and social impacts have also to be monitored. And likewise, alongside the quantification of the removal, there needs to be a quantification of the uncertainty associated with that quantification of the cork. And that uncertainty must also be reported and made public. So overall, I go back to this slide that we started with.
Elias, I propose we skip that slide, and the topic of permanence has been very interesting for the audience. So for the benefit of the participants, let's have a couple of questions answered here and before closing. So why did you update to 200 years?
Well, the first thing I should say for the update to 200 years is that our methodologies follows a regular update cycle for the purpose to align with the latest science available. And this is what we've done in the past year. We've been reviewing the new publications that have been performed around biochar, that have been made on biochar persistence. And I must say that the biochar persistence field has been very active over the last years. I've contributed myself to a couple of publications, but also other groups have started to publish on biochar persistence, and they've been lively discussions. All the evidence available from the different approaches and publications is kind of unanimous that biochar is climate relevant and that the previously agreed 100-year time horizon was overly conservative. And with all that evidence put together and analyzed, we are comfortable moving to a longer time horizon of several centuries. Yeah, so alignment with latest science, in short, is
okay. Thank you. And then there is somebody who has seen the EU biochar methodology draft asking, are we different, or why did we not align with that one?
So the draft of the European Union is to some extent similar to our approach conceptually, but also has certain differences. Both the European Union and Puro have decided to consider biochar as permanent removal with a time frame of several centuries, 200 years, is used in both methodologies for the parameterization of the decay model. So in that sense, the methodologies are similar. But however, we use different equations for the persistence model. One probably being a bit more based on recent analysis of data in our case. But the European Union has, for instance, highlighted that they were open to other parameterization and were considering maybe changes there in the future as well. And the European Union also has opened for a quantification approach using random reflectance measurements. That is something we have also considered, but we've decided to not for conservativeness reasons and also readiness of the science behind it, decided not to allow that for quantification, but we allow it for optional reporting to continue advancing the field there. So certain similarity on the principles and approaches, but certain differences in the technical details here. And that is based on different reading of the science and the level of conservatism that is required for the VCM here.
Okay, let's continue on that topic. There is a question of when do you think that the random reflectance will be ready?
Difficult question, but we are following at Puro very closely the publications on the scientific publications on random reflectance and inertinite-based approaches. We keep following that. We are aware of ongoing research efforts, in particular in the domain of combining decay-based model with random reflectance measurements to make the two approaches merge and unify. And that's something we're very excited about. In terms of time estimate, I think the field is being very active and publications being on the way. It could be in the range of 2 to 3 years that we see further changes in persistence quantification. I say that without the intention to say that there are doubts or uncertainty in biochar persistence. No, this is not what I'm saying. On the contrary, I'm saying that it's a gradual and progressive increase in persistence claim that we are seeing. We went from more than 100 years to several centuries, and there might be potential for even longer. That needs to be confirmed, and a stronger consensus in the scientific community needs to be also made there before we can take it to the VCM. Because I should remember that in the VCM, one of the founding principles beyond project specificity of calculation is also having sufficiently conservative approaches. And that is what underpins our decisions here.
Thank you. And very short answer to the final question. Do we lose a lot of corks due to upgrading to new methodology?
So it is true that the equations are different and that there will be changes in the term C stored and C losses compared to the current model we use. I cannot give a definitive answer for all projects because it's a bit more complicated than that. Certain projects, probably the one that are more in the higher range of HC ratio, will gain compared to previous equations, while maybe the one that are on the lower end of HC ratios will lose a little bit of corks, but it's kind of like the curves of shifting a little bit.
So a little bit to both directions. Thank you very much, Dr. Elias Assi. Thank you to all the participants. If you can still flick to the last slide, reminding people that this is open for discussion. The public consultation is there until April 24th. So please do give your feedback and comments. Thank you for today. The recording will be available shortly.
Thank you, Marianne.